Welcome to this new videocast about MySQL. This one, it's about installing Drupal in OCI with MySQL 8.0. Previously I did one on WordPress that was very popular, and so this time we're gonna focus on Drupal. So we're gonna create first a VM, a compute instance, and we're gonna use to install Drupal, so Apache, PHP, and Drupal, and we're gonna use Oracle Linux 7.7. And also, as you can see, I'm not using my free tier, but I'm using my pay version of my pay account on OCI because we're gonna create two different subnets. So we're gonna isolate the database server from the internet. And because we need different gateways, only this is not available on the free tier. But if you don't want to do that, you can do exactly the same as we did with WordPress for Drupal with the free tier. So now I create here my first VM. That takes some time, and we have here the public IP that we're gonna use to connect to Drupal, but also to connect through SSH to configure everything we need on the server. So I'm using here the key. I just paste it. So I pasted the public key, and I'm using the private part of it to connect to that IP using the OPC user, which is the default Oracle Cloud Operator user. So I am now on OPC Drupal, and I will install two repositories, the EPL one and the REMI one, to install the latest PHP. We need the latest PHP because it supports by default with the connector, with the PHP connector, it supports MySQL 8 completely with the default authentication plugin. So let's do this. As you can see, Apache is a dependency, so installing PHP, it will install Apache also. So we accept here the GPG key, the signing of the packages, and everything gets installed. So now let's verify that. We're going to verify here the version of PHP that we have installed and the authentication plugins that are loaded with the driver for the MySQL connector, right? So let's do this command, and we can see that caching SHA2 it's enabled, it's loaded, so this is perfect, what we need. So now we're gonna go in the we're gonna install Drupal in the document root. So we unpack it. So Drupal 8.8.4, as you can see here. So after that, let's delete what we have downloaded after we have unpacked it, and we will also replace the HTML folder by Drupal, because this will be the only site available on this compute instance. So let's replace HTML by Drupal, change the ownership because it won't be operated by root but by Apache. So let's change for everything in HTML. So now we have installed Drupal. So this is the IP we're going to use also to connect to, in our browser. So first we're going to start Apache. So we start Apache. We can see that it's running, no problem. We open here and we see that we are not able to connect from our browser. Why is this? It's because by default Oracle Linux has a firewall enabled, so we need to add the connection to the port 80. So when we do that, we have the first page of Drupal, and we can see that the setup can start. So before we have done that, so we open locally the port 80, but don't forget that we need also to open it in the public subnet. So we have a security list of rules, and the port 80 must be open there too. For me, it was already open because I opened it when I did the WordPress videocast. So this is okay. So now we're gonna create the second subnet. That will be the private subnet. So the one where all the database server, and here my only single MySQL server will be added to that subnet. That won't be able to have any public IP and won't be able to be reached from the internet. So currently I've only run a root table, so we're going to use that one, but we're going to create one after that. So here I need to say, oh, it's a private subnet, so no public IP will be allowed on any single machine in this subnet, and I can create it. So now we have public subnet 10.0.0.0 and the private subnet 10.0.1.0. We're gonna add a new gateway. So we had the internet gateway. So now we're gonna create the NAT gateway. And this is why I'm not using the free tier, because I'm not able to do both at the same time in the free tier. So I'm creating here the NAT gateway. And now I will create a new routing table that I will call it my NAT routing. So it's created. If we go on it, we can see that we can we can add a rule, and we're gonna use the NAT gateway to connect to the world. So when our machine is to go to the internet, it will use the NAT gateway. So now in the private subnet, I'm able to edit it and to change the routing table that we had only one option earlier. We can use now the NAT routing. So we have a public subnet and a private subnet that are done. So if I want to connect to any machine in the private subnet, I will have to connect to the public one machine on the public net first. So now I will create my MySQL instance. I create also a new compute instance using again Oracle Linux 7.7. I will use same availability domain, but this time the subnet I specify it's a private subnet. As you can see, I'm not allowed to assign any public IP. I will use the SSH key. I will paste the same as I did previously. So now he has a private IP, no public IP, and in the range, in the subnet we wanted 10.0.1. So now I connect again to my Drupal, and from there, because I did SSH minus capital A, so I forwarded my agent, I can connect to the MySQL server. So now we are connected on the MySQL server, and we can start by installing the MySQL repository. So I will install MySQL 8 community repos. When it's done, now I'm able to install, of course, MySQL server. That's what I'm doing right now. So install MySQL community server. And the latest at the moment I do this video is the 8.0.19. So let's install it. We also need to accept the key that sign the package. Everything is downloaded, and now it's installing everything we need. So the architecture is also available on the blog post. We can also here we use by default the default security list, and we need to connect to 33060 and 3306, and it is already allowed, so this is no problem for us. So now that MySQL is created, we're gonna start MySQL, and MySQL 8 by default wants to be as most secure as possible and generates a random password for you. It is a temporary random password that we need to recover to able to connect the first time, and we will be asked to change it immediately. So this is the mandatory, temporary password. I'm gonna use the MySQL shell as a client, much more convenient, much more recent, allows more stuff to do. So this is the one I really encourage you to use instead of using the old MySQL client. So I'm installing MySQL shell, same version 8.19. Always use the latest one, it's safer, even if you use the older version of MySQL 8. So now I will connect using MySQL shell in SQL mode. By default it uses Python, it uses JavaScript or Python or SQL, and this time it's SQL. So I use root at localhost with the temporary password, and I am requested to change it. So let's change it immediately using the set password command in SQL. Done. So now I'm going to create a schema, so a new database for Drupal, and let's call it Drupal, which is easy to remember and it makes sense. Now we're going to create a user, and I won't specify any, I haven't done any authentication plugin changes, so that will use the more secure by default. So I will create that user Drupal that I will identify by a password. And I will grant all the privileges to that user only on that Drupal schema. This is done. Perfect. So now we need also, as I said earlier, we need Oracle Linux has a firewall by default, so we need to allow the connection on port 3306 also locally in this machine. So this is done. Let's reload the firewall. We have already seen that in the subnet, in the default rules, we have already created 306. So now it's not needed to add it again. So now we're going to create it with the demo information in the Drupal. So we will have a lot of data. So we can see that by default we have some issues, and one of them, for example, it's the PHP extension GD. I thought I've installed it earlier, but I did a typo, so let's install it right now. So install PHP GD. This is perfect. We can restart my Apache again. So I use systemd. We restart Apache. We can check again the page. We reload the page, and we can see that GD is not more requested. But we have also some file system issues and some file missings. So let's create the missing file. We can see in the page, in the Drupal page, that we need to copy the default settings. So let's do that. Perfect. Let's change the ownership to Apache. So some warnings, and we still have some other issues. So we can see also, I told you that the firewall was enabled by default, but also SE Linux is enabled by default. So we saw in audit.log some access that were not granted or allowed. So we're gonna change the context of some file to tell this is for Apache read-write content, and that the Apache process can modify them, and this is for everything in var www HTML site. So did that. Let's do a refresh, and we can see no more errors. Clean URL is the configuration of mode rewrite that we don't really need, but opcode caching, we can do that very quickly. So let's do that. We just need to install one package and restart Apache. So what was the name? I know it's opcache. Okay, let's install PHP opcache. It will install the right version directly. We can see it install the opcache 7.4.4. So we can restart Apache and we don't have that issue anymore. Just the mode rewrite to have cleaner URL. It complains about that, but this is not important for us here. Let's continue. So now we have to provide a database configuration in the setup. So let's call it Drupal. The username was also Drupal. The password is the one we added in the shell just before. I can copy paste it here. Let's do that. So our database is not local to the web server, so we need to specify it. So let's specify it. It's not on localhost, but it's on 10.0.1.2. We can save. Let's see if it works, if it can connect. And yes. So now it's installed Drupal. That takes some time. Then it updates all the translation for the demo. That takes also some time. And now it's there. So now let's make a name for our website. Let's put an email address, a username and password to be able to connect to it. So I will use admin. Yeah, I put that password, but it's fun because I don't remember it. So let's change it to something easier to remember. Okay, done. So we can change the country, lefred.be, so I'm in Belgium, and the time zone is in Europe, Brussels. Here we are. Save and continue. Okay, we can save it here too. So it configures everything again. It updates some translation for the demo we added. And finally, our Drupal server website is there. Perfect, here is our Drupal. So in less than 20 minutes, we have set up and deployed an Apache server with PHP and Drupal and a MySQL database server on OCI very easily. So, and you can see that it's quite fast to reply to do whatever we want. So it's very easy. So for more information, you can find all the details in the article on lefred.be. And I hope you enjoyed this video and that you're gonna use MySQL 8, and of course, if you need a cloud provider, OCI, it's very nice. Thank you very much and see you. Bye bye.